Hi, this is Annika. I'm sitting in my car getting ready to head into the desert, Death Valley, which I've never been to. I'm spending 4 days in the wilderness. But before I drop off of the digital world, I got a question in response to the last video I recorded about internal abusers. And I love the question. I love the question. It was actually the same question that was on my own mind. I was actually thinking about talking about that next, and I asked myself the same question, which is, how do you know when you're through a cycle? And I call these reeling cycles, these cycles of running into internal abusers, going through triggers, positive or negative triggers, moving through the pain that's stored in parts and integrating them. And how do you know when their cycle is complete? And that is such a valuable question to me, because I know it in my body, but I don't always listen. In fact, I rarely listen. In my mind, it's very, very easy to confuse a dissociative calm for inner peace. They are so similar because the pain is absent. Like, it doesn't hurt. And so it's very, very easy to deceive myself into thinking that I am not in a reeling cycle, that I'm not triggered, that I'm in my essence, that my nervous system is perfectly regulated, that I'm grounded, and that I'm present, because I don't feel pain. I feel fine, and I feel calm. But there's a big difference between the dissociative calm, which is actually part of the reeling cycles, and it comes before the pain. And there's a layer of pain between the dissociative calm and being in the essence of self and in inner peace. And each cycle, like the transition from the inner peace and being in essence to the dissociative calm, is pretty seamless. I haven't been very good at noticing when that happens, but in retrospect I can see it. And in retrospect, what changes is that the aliveness is gone. I think that's the easiest way I can put it. There's like when I'm in that essence, when I'm in that state of true inner peace, having just moved through a cycle, I just feel very, very alive. Like, every part of my body feels alive. I can feel energy running through my body. It feels a lot like being in love. It feels like it's that feeling that I get when I am crushing on someone, and it's reciprocal, and I end up like entering into a new relationship, and that exciting crush and just absolutely falling in love, and that, like, when everything just feels so much more I keep wanting, I'm alive. I just keep coming back to that word because I don't have one that fits better. It's like the walking on cloud nine, like feeling, but not dissociated, but just feeling so grateful and so excited to be alive. Even in the calm moments, like even, waiting for a bus and seeing like a bee fly by, or seeing a flower, and then just feeling just in awe of this wonderful, beautiful creation. It's that. And it's not necessarily ecstatic. It's actually relatively slow for me. Like, it's not like being high. It's more of a just being very present. And when I move out of that essence and into the beginning of a new cycle, that feeling goes away, but there's no pain yet. And so when I check in, I tend to look for pain. I tend to look for like, oh, am I feeling depressed? Am I feeling anxious? And if I'm just feeling calm, I just think everything's fine. And so I don't, those states used to be really rare. Like up until a few years ago, that was an extraordinary state to be in. Like if I actually literally fell in love with someone, I would feel that way. Or, just like certain things happened, like, but it wasn't home. That's not where I lived. It's an exotic place that I visited sometimes. And now it's more like that's become home base. That's home. And but the dissociative calm is so familiar to me that I mistake it for home. I guess it's not. It's newer. And then from that dissociative calm, where I'm not feeling any pain, so it seems peaceful, just not in an enlivening sort of way. The next step then is the anxiety and the depression. And that's why it's so tempting to just stay in that calm and convince myself that it's true inner peace and surrender. Because the anxiety and the depression suck. I mean, who likes anxiety or depression, right? But when I start a new cycle, I move from that calm into an alternating state of anxiety and depression. In the anxiety, I find myself worrying about what I should be doing. Like the anxiety, it's a form of trying to be too big, like trying to move too fast, do too much, be bigger in some ways than I actually am. And the depression is kind of the opposite. It's a shutdown where like I don't want to do anything. I don't want to move at all. And I just feel very small and feel like I should be smaller than I actually am. And so like anxiety is kind of this overshooting that presence like in upward, and depression is kind of like undercutting it. But the amazing thing is like it feels like this razor sharp, tiny line in the middle. That is the authentic self and surrender. Like between that like anxious, too big or posturing, and that depressed, too small or collapsing. That tiny line in the middle, it just feels like this razor edge, thin, impossible line. But then from another perspective, when I'm in it, it feels like the world just kind of flips. Like it's not this tiny little line anymore, but it flips, and it's like, oh gosh, this is always here. It's always here. Surrender is always available. So it's not in the trying to get to this narrow little space. It's in the surrender to what actually is, which the depression and the anxiety is the first part. And then underneath that, like the next layer down is the negative self-talk. Underneath the anxiety and the depression come the talking, like I should be better, I should be, what's wrong with me, everything sucks, everything's going to hell, blah blah blah. So the kind of pain expressed through narrative, through beliefs, through like a negative story, like a hardened pain. And then underneath that is the raw pain. That's where I actually feel the pain in its raw form, in the emoting. That's where I often find my body shaking or crying or screaming, where it's like a raw emotion that doesn't go through the mind, that just wants to be moved through the body. And then on the other side of that is the surrender and the coming back into essence and the actual inner peace. And then the cycle starts over again, because our parts live in different places in the cycle. And so each time that that cycle completes, this reeling cycle, another piece of the self comes into essence and starts living in essence rather than in the dissociative calm. And so that's why it's worth it going through that cycle. I think we have this cultural misunderstanding that it's like a wave, like, oh, you're down in depression, you got to get back up, you're down in depression, like it's just this wave that doesn't go anywhere. But it's not. It's a spiral. Each time we spiral outward into, you know, the numbness, the dissociation, then the anxiety, the depression, then like the negative stories, like the hard stories and beliefs and the despair, then into the actual raw pain, and then through that into surrender. Each time we do that, we bring a piece of our soul back from that outer space of dissociation and into our core and into our essence, and that gives us more presence, that like allows us to be more present in our lives, because there's more of us now there, like not out there but in there, and so we can actually experience beauty more deeply, we can love more deeply, we can empathize more profoundly. And so that's why it's worth it going through those cycles. But it's very easy to get lost along the way and get confused along the way. So I love that question for that reason, because it's a really good reminder to track those sensations in my body and to look for that aliveness and to notice whether the aliveness is still there. Not just looking for the presence or the absence of pain or anxiety or depression, but looking for whether that tingling, I am in love with everything, like that sea, water, fowl, bird creature that's floating over there, you know, that's just like, I'm in love with that. You know, just like the marveling and awe and wonder, whether that's still there or not. And using that to kind of track where I'm at in a cycle. So I appreciate that question and that reminder to do that. Yeah. It's getting cold here. The sun's dipping behind the horizon, behind the hill, and I'm heading out into the desert. And I'm looking forward to many cycles, I'm sure. I think being in the desert with no distractions, I imagine that there will be many parts who want to be seen, who want to come up and be witnessed. So I imagine it's going to be a lot of cycling while I'm in the desert. So I'll see you on the other side.